The icy wilderness of Europa stretched endlessly, a frozen wasteland bathed in the faint glow of Jupiter's massive presence. It was a place where silence reigned supreme, broken only by the occasional groan of shifting ice beneath the surface. For centuries, humanity had studied this moon from afar, marveling at its potential for life hidden beneath its thick crust of ice. But no human had ever set foot here, until now. Lyra's ship spiraled out of control, its sleek silver frame glinting weakly under the dim sunlight reflected off Jupiter. Inside, she clung to her seat as alarms blared and sparks flew from damaged consoles. Her bioluminescent skin flickered like a dying flame, mirroring the chaos around her. She wasn't supposed to be here. Her journey had been one of desperation, a flight from war, betrayal, and hunters who sought to exploit her knowledge. And now fate had delivered her into the coldest corner of the solar system. With a deafening crash, the ship slammed into the jagged terrain below. Ice shattered outward in all directions, sending shards flying like daggers through the air. For a moment, there was nothing but stillness. Then came the hiss of escaping gases as the hull cracked open, exposing the interior to Europa's unforgiving environment. Lyra groaned, pain coursing through her body as she struggled to free herself from the wreckage. Her glowing skin dimmed further with each passing second, a sign that her energy reserves were fading fast. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing, clawing at the exposed edges of the ship. Temperatures plummeted far below what even Europa's harshest storms could muster. Lyra stumbled out onto the ice, her movements sluggish and unsteady. Each step felt like dragging her feet through molten lead. Her breath formed clouds of vapor that vanished almost instantly in the freezing air. Above her, Jupiter loomed large, its swirling storms mocking her predicament. She was alone, injured, and stranded on a hostile world millions of miles from home. But Lyra was not without hope. Despite her dire situation, she possessed an innate resilience honed by years of survival against impossible odds. She scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of shelter or salvation. All she saw was endless white stretching toward infinity. Yet somewhere deep inside, she refused to give up. Her people had always believed in finding light, even in the darkest places, and right now she needed that belief more than ever. Unbeknownst to Lyra, help was closer than she realized. Orbiting high above Europa, Elias Voss sat in the cramped cockpit of his research vessel, monitoring seismic data streaming in from the moon's surface. He was a man of science, driven by curiosity and a desire to understand the mysteries of the universe. When the sensors picked up unusual activity, an explosion followed by tremors, he knew something extraordinary had happened. At first, he thought it might be a natural phenomenon, perhaps a volcanic eruption beneath the ice. But when he zoomed in on the coordinates, his heart skipped a beat. There, etched into the snow-covered landscape, was the unmistakable scar of a crash site. Elias hesitated for only a moment before making his decision. Protocol dictated that he report the anomaly and wait for reinforcements, but time was of the essence. Whoever, or whatever, had crashed down there wouldn't survive long in such brutal conditions. Ignoring the risks, he prepared his lander for descent. As he approached the surface, the sight of the wreckage filled him with both awe and dread. What lay inside? Was it debris from some ancient civilization, or something far more advanced and dangerous? When Elias finally stepped onto the ice, the cold hit him like a hammer despite his insulated suit. His boots crunched against the frost as he made his way toward the ruined ship. Peering inside, he found her, Lyra. Her luminous form caught his eye immediately, casting a soft glow that seemed almost magical against the stark surroundings. She looked fragile yet otherworldly, her wide eyes locking onto his with a mixture of fear and curiosity. In that instant, Elias knew this encounter would change everything, for both of them. As he extended a gloved hand toward her, Lyra hesitated, unsure whether to trust this strange being clad in metal and fabric. But then she saw something in his eyes, a kindness that transcended species and language. Slowly, tentatively, She reached out, her trembling fingers brushing against his glove. It was a moment. Elias stared at the glowing figure before him, his mind racing with questions. Who, or what, was she? How had she ended up here on Europa, of all places? And most importantly, how could he help her survive in this unforgiving environment? Lyra's faint glow pulsed weakly, a silent signal that her strength was fading fast. Without hesitation, Elias scooped her into his arms, careful not to harm her delicate frame. Her skin felt cool against his suit, and though she flinched at first, she didn't resist. Instead, her luminous eyes locked onto his face, searching for answers neither of them could yet provide. Carrying her back to his rover wasn't easy. The icy winds whipped around them like angry spirits, threatening to knock Elias off balance with every step. But he pressed on, driven by an instinctive need to protect this mysterious being who seemed so utterly vulnerable. When they finally reached the safety of the vehicle, Elias sealed the hatch behind them and turned up the heat. The warmth inside was a stark contrast to the freezing wasteland outside, but it wasn't enough to fully revive Lyra. She curled up on the floor, her glow flickering like a dying candle. For hours, Elias worked tirelessly to stabilize her. He rummaged through his supplies, trying to find anything that might help: a thermal blanket, nutrient gel, even water. None of these were designed for alien physiology, but he improvised as best he could. At one point, he held a small container of liquid near her lips, hoping she'd understand. To his relief, she hesitantly took it, sipping cautiously before closing her eyes, as if savoring the sensation. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Communication proved far more challenging. They had no shared language, no way to bridge the gap between their worlds. Yet Elias refused to let frustration get the better of him. Using gestures and facial expressions, he tried to convey reassurance. He pointed to himself and said, "Elias," then gestured toward her, waiting for a response. After a moment, she touched her chest and whispered something soft and melodic. Though he couldn't understand the word, he smiled warmly, nodding to show he understood. From that moment on, they began building their own rudimentary form of communication, one gesture, one sound at a time. As days passed, their bond grew stronger. Lyra started mimicking some of Elias's actions, learning quickly despite their differences. One evening, while Elias tinkered with a damaged piece of equipment, she reached out and placed her hand over his. Her touch sent a strange warmth coursing through him, not just physical but emotional. For the first time since arriving on Europa, he didn't feel alone. There was something about her presence, a quiet strength and resilience, that reminded him of why he'd chosen this life of exploration in the first place. But it wasn't just Elias teaching Lyra. She had lessons of her own to share. One night, as they sat together in the dim light of the rover, she closed her eyes and focused intently. Slowly, patterns of light began to dance across her skin, forming images that seemed almost lifelike. Elias watched in awe as scenes unfolded before him. Vivid landscapes filled with towering trees that shimmered like glass, rivers flowing with liquid light, and skies painted in colors he'd never imagined. These weren't random visions. They were memories of her homeworld, glimpses into a universe far beyond his comprehension. Through these projections, Elias learned fragments of Lyra's story. He saw flashes of war-torn cities, explosions tearing apart beautiful structures, and shadowy figures chasing her through dark corridors. It became clear that she hadn't come to Europa by choice. She was running from something or someone. The realization weighed heavily on Elias. Whatever dangers lurked in her past, they were still out there, possibly closer than either of them realized. Despite the looming threats, moments of connection continued to blossom between them. One day, Elias showed Lyra pictures of Earth stored on his tablet. She gazed at the images of blue oceans, green forests, and bustling cities with wide-eyed wonder. When he pointed to himself and then to Earth, she tilted her head quizzically. He repeated the gesture, emphasizing the connection. Finally, understanding dawned in her eyes, and she smiled, a small tentative curve of her lips that lit up her entire face. That smile stayed with Elias long after the moment passed. It wasn't just gratitude or curiosity he saw in her expression. It was recognition. Recognition of their shared humanity, or perhaps something deeper, something universal. In that fleeting instant, Elias felt certain of one thing. No matter how different their worlds might be, they were bound by something far greater than language or biology. They were bound by hope, the hope that even in the darkest corners of the universe, light could still be found. And so, amidst the frozen wilderness of Europa, two strangers from vastly different worlds began forging a friendship unlike any other. Neither knew what challenges lay ahead, but for now, they found solace in each other's company, united by the simple yet profound act of reaching out across the void. Days turned into weeks as Elias and Lyra continued their fragile coexistence inside the cramped confines of the rover. The icy wilderness outside remained relentless, but within the small, heated space, a quiet rhythm began to take shape. Elias adapted quickly, learning to anticipate Lyra's needs even when she couldn't articulate them. He noticed how her glow brightened slightly when she was comfortable or curious, and dimmed when she was tired or in pain. It became a kind of silent language between them, a way to communicate without words. One morning, Elias woke up to find Lyra staring intently at his tablet, which he'd left on overnight. The screen displayed images of Earth's oceans, waves crashing against rocky shores, dolphins leaping through sparkling water. Her fingers hovered over the device, as if afraid to touch it, but her glowing eyes reflected awe and longing. Elias smiled softly and handed her the tablet. She accepted it cautiously, tilting her head as she traced the edges of the screen with her fingertips. When a video clip played, showing children laughing on a sandy beach, her expression softened. For the first time since they'd met, Elias saw something akin to peace in her features. Encouraged by this reaction, Elias began sharing more about Earth. He showed her pictures of towering mountains, bustling cities, and endless fields of golden wheat. Each image sparked new reactions from Lyra, sometimes wonder, sometimes sadness, as though memories of her own world were stirred by these glimpses of another. In return, she used her unique ability to project light patterns onto her skin, creating vivid scenes of her homeworld for Elias. Through these projections, he saw landscapes unlike anything he'd ever imagined. Crystalline forests that hummed with energy, rivers of liquid light flowing beneath twin suns, and skies painted in swirling hues of violet and gold. These exchanges deepened their bond, transforming what had started as survival into something far more profound. Elias found himself captivated not just by Lyra's beauty, but by her resilience. Despite everything she'd endured, the crash, the freezing temperatures, the isolation, she never gave up. Her determination inspired him, reminding him of why he'd chosen a life of exploration in the first place. For years, Elias had felt adrift, disconnected from the people back on Earth who couldn't understand his obsession with distant worlds. But now, stranded on Europa with an alien companion, he felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever before. Lyra, too, seemed to draw strength from their connection. At night, when the wind howled outside and the darkness pressed in, she would sit close to Elias, her faint glow casting soft shadows across the walls of the rover. Sometimes, she would reach out and place her hand over his, her touch warm despite the cold metal of his gloves. These moments were unspoken yet deeply meaningful, filling the silence with a sense of belonging neither of them had known before. But their growing friendship wasn't without challenges. One evening, while attempting to repair a damaged heating unit, Elias accidentally triggered a loud alarm. The sudden noise startled Lyra, causing her to recoil violently. Her glow flared brightly, and for a moment, Elias feared she might lash out. Instead, she curled into herself, trembling. Realizing his mistake, Elias quickly silenced the alarm and knelt beside her, speaking softly and using calming gestures. Slowly, her glow dimmed again, and she looked up at him with wary eyes. It was a reminder that trust took time and patience to build. To make amends, Elias decided to teach her something new. Using scraps of metal and wire, he constructed a simple musical instrument resembling a xylophone. When he tapped the bars, gentle tones filled the air. Lyra tilted her head, intrigued. Encouraging her to try, Elias guided her hand to the instrument. At first, her movements were hesitant, producing discordant notes. But soon, she began experimenting, tapping out rhythms that grew increasingly melodic. The sound seemed to resonate with her, bringing a sparkle to her eyes that Elias hadn't seen before. Music became their bridge, a universal language neither needed to translate. Together, they created melodies that echoed through the rover, blending human ingenuity with alien creativity. These sessions brought laughter and joy, moments of pure connection that transcended their differences. Yet beneath the surface, both knew their time together was fleeting. Europa's harsh environment wouldn't allow them to stay forever, and questions lingered about whether Lyra could truly recover enough to leave, or whether help would arrive before it was too late. Still, for now, they clung to the present, finding solace in each other's company. As Elias watched Lyra play the makeshift xylophone, her glow pulsing gently in time with the music, he realized something important. Their bond wasn't defined by species or circumstance. It was rooted in understanding, compassion, and the shared desire to find light in the darkest places. And in that realization, Elias found hope, not just for Lyra's survival, but for the possibility of connection across the vastness of space. For the first time in his life, Elias didn't feel alone. The fragile peace between Elias and Lyra was shattered one fateful evening when a massive storm swept across Europa. The winds howled like a chorus of banshees, battering the rover with such ferocity that it rocked on its stabilizers. Inside, the temperature began to drop as the heating system struggled against the onslaught. Elias worked frantically to reinforce the seals around the hatch, his breath fogging up his visor despite the suit's insulation. Lyra sat huddled in a corner, her glow dimmer than ever, her wide eyes fixed on the rattling walls, as if expecting them to collapse at any moment. But the storm wasn't the only danger lurking outside. As Elias monitored the external sensors, he noticed something unusual, a faint heat signature moving steadily toward their location. At first, he dismissed it as debris stirred by the wind, but when the readings became more distinct, his stomach tightened. Someone, or something, was out there, navigating the icy wasteland with purpose. He glanced at Lyra, who seemed oblivious to the new threat, her focus consumed by the chaos surrounding them. Whatever this presence was, it couldn't be coincidence. Not here, not now. When the storm finally subsided hours later, leaving behind an eerie stillness, Elias ventured outside to investigate. The rover's cameras had captured glimpses of movement during the night, blurry shapes darting just beyond the range of visibility. Armed with a handheld scanner and a determination to protect Lyra, Elias stepped cautiously onto the frozen surface. The air was deathly quiet, save for the occasional creak of shifting ice beneath his boots. His heart pounded as he scanned the horizon, searching for signs of life. It didn't take long to find evidence. About 50 meters from the rover, he discovered tracks etched into the snow, long, deliberate strides that couldn't have been made by natural forces. They led away from the crash site of Lyra's ship and disappeared into the distance. Elias knelt to examine them more closely, his gloved fingers brushing against the edges. The impressions were too uniform, too precise to belong to any known creature on Europa. This was intelligent design, and it sent a chill down his spine. Back inside the rover, Elias shared his discovery with Lyra using gestures and sketches on a tablet. When he drew the tracks and pointed toward the direction they came from, her reaction was immediate. Her glow flared brightly, and she pressed herself against the wall, trembling. For the first time since they'd met, Elias saw fear in her eyes, not the kind born of isolation or injury, but raw, primal terror. She began projecting images onto her skin again, but these were chaotic and fragmented. Explosions, shadowy figures wielding weapons, and fleeing crowds filled the tiny space, overwhelming him with their intensity. Through trial and error, Elias pieced together the truth. These weren't random wanderers, they were hunters, members of Lyra's own species, sent to track her down. They sought something she carried, knowledge or technology vital to their ongoing war. And now, they were closing in. Desperation gripped Elias as he realized the gravity of their situation. If these pursuers found them, there would be no negotiation, no mercy. Lyra's weakened state made escape nearly impossible, and staying put meant certain capture, or worse. Yet abandoning her was unthinkable. Over the past weeks, she had become more than just a stranger from another world. She was a companion, a source of inspiration, and perhaps even a friend. Leaving her behind would mean betraying everything he stood for. Determined to fight back, Elias devised a plan. Using salvaged parts from Lyra's crashed ship, he began modifying the rover's systems to enhance its speed and durability. He also rigged makeshift traps around their perimeter, hoping to slow down or deter their pursuers. Each task required hours of painstaking work, but Lyra stayed by his side, offering silent encouragement through her glowing presence. Occasionally, she would point to specific tools or components, guiding him with subtle movements. It was clear she understood the stakes and trusted him to keep her safe. As the days passed, tension mounted. The hunters' tracks grew closer, their presence palpable even before Elias spotted them through the rover's cameras. One night, while repairing a damaged sensor array, Elias caught sight of distant lights flickering on the horizon, beams cutting through the darkness like predatory eyes. His hands froze mid-motion, and for a moment, all he could do was stare. Then, steeling himself, he returned to the rover and sealed the hatch behind him. Inside, Lyra waited anxiously, her glow pulsing erratically. Elias placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, though he doubted she fully understood his intentions. What mattered most was that she trusted him, and he vowed not to let her down. Together, they prepared for what lay ahead, knowing the next confrontation could decide their fate. For the first time since arriving on Europa, Elias felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Protecting Lyra wasn't just about saving an alien life. It was about proving that humanity could rise above fear and greed, choosing compassion over conflict. As he powered up the rover and set course for safer ground, Elias resolved to face whatever dangers awaited them head-on. No matter the cost, he would ensure Lyra survived. And somewhere deep inside, he hoped that doing so might pave the way for a brighter future, not just for her, but for both their worlds. The revelation came on a bitterly cold night, when the tension between survival and discovery reached its breaking point. Inside the rover, Elias sat cross-legged across from Lyra, their makeshift communication tools scattered around them. Over the past days, they had grown closer than ever, relying on each other to navigate the dangers of Europa's frozen wilderness. But now, with hunters closing in and time running out, Elias knew he needed answers. Answers that only Lyra could provide. Using his tablet, Elias drew symbols representing her homeworld, then pointed to her chest. "Your world," he said slowly, emphasizing the gesture. Lyra nodded, her glowing skin flickering faintly as if she understood. Encouraged, Elias added more details to the sketch. 2 warring factions, one side wielding weapons while the other fled in terror. When he showed it to her, Lyra froze. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked as though she might retreat into herself. Instead, she reached out and touched the image, her fingers tracing the fleeing figures with unmistakable sorrow. Then, without warning, she began projecting light patterns onto her skin again. But this time, the images were clearer, more deliberate. Scenes unfolded before Elias's eyes, telling a story far more complex than he'd imagined. He saw cities suspended in midair, connected by shimmering bridges of energy. People moved through these cities, their forms radiant like Lyra's, working together in harmony. Then came the shift. the arrival of shadowy figures clad in dark armor, carrying devices that drained the very life force from the environment. Chaos erupted as explosions tore through the skies, scattering survivors into hiding. Elias watched intently, piecing together the narrative. These invaders weren't just enemies. They were part of Lyra's own people, corrupted by greed and power. They sought control over a resource so precious it could tip the balance of their war, or end it entirely. As the projections continued, Elias saw something else. Lyra standing before a council of elders, holding a glowing orb in her hands. The orb pulsed with an inner light, radiating waves of energy that seemed to heal and sustain everything it touched. It was clear this object held immense significance, a key to restoring peace or unleashing devastation. Suddenly, the images shifted to show Lyra fleeing, pursued by the same shadowy figures Elias had glimpsed on the horizon. She was no ordinary refugee. She was a guardian, entrusted with protecting the orb's secrets at all costs. And now, those secrets rested somewhere within her damaged ship, or perhaps even within her very being. When the projections faded, Elias stared at Lyra, his mind reeling. This wasn't just about saving her life anymore. It was about safeguarding knowledge that could alter the course of entire civilizations, including humanity's. If the wrong hands claimed the orb's power, the consequences would be catastrophic. Yet handing it over to strangers felt equally dangerous. For the first time since meeting Lyra, Elias found himself torn between duty and compassion. He spent hours pacing inside the rover, weighing his options. On one hand, helping Lyra escape meant risking exposure to forces beyond his understanding. What if her pursuers followed her trail back to Earth? Could humanity defend itself against such advanced technology? On the other hand, abandoning her would mean betraying not only her trust, but also the values he held dear. Compassion, curiosity, and hope had driven him to explore the stars in the first place. How could he turn away now? Finally, exhaustion forced Elias to sit down beside Lyra. She looked up at him, her luminous eyes filled with quiet resolve. Reaching out, she placed her hand over his, her touch warm despite the layers of fabric separating them. In that moment, Elias realized something profound. Lyra wasn't asking him to fight her battles for her. She was simply asking for a chance to survive, to protect what mattered most, and perhaps to find allies willing to stand alongside her. With newfound clarity, Elias made his decision. Using the rover's limited supplies, he began assembling a plan. First, he would repair Lyra's ship enough for her to leave Europa. Second, he would ensure she had the means to defend herself against further pursuit. Finally, and most importantly, he would accompany her as far as possible, guiding her toward safety, even if it meant venturing deeper into unknown territory. Lyra seemed to sense his determination. Her glow brightened slightly, casting soft shadows across the walls of the rover. Together, they worked tirelessly, combining human ingenuity with alien technology to prepare for their next move. Each step brought them closer to freedom, but also closer to danger. The hunters' tracks were growing nearer, their presence marked by eerie flashes of light visible even during the day. One evening, as they prepared to depart, Elias turned to Lyra and spoke softly, knowing she couldn't understand his words, but hoping she'd grasp their meaning. "We'll get through this," he said. "Together." Lyra tilted her head, studying him intently. Then, with a small smile, she projected a single image onto her skin. Two figures standing side by side, bathed in radiant light. It was a promise, a vow that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. As the rover rumbled forward, leaving behind the relative safety of their makeshift shelter, Elias felt a surge of hope mingled with fear. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with peril and sacrifice. But for the first time in his life, he understood the true purpose of exploration, not just to seek answers, but to forge connections that transcended boundaries. And as long as Lyra stood beside him, he believed anything was possible, even finding a way to bridge two worlds divided by war and misunderstanding. For now, though, There was only the icy expanse of Europa stretching before them, and the relentless pursuit of those who sought to claim what Lyra guarded so fiercely. The journey across Europa's frozen surface was nothing short of harrowing. Elias and Lyra pushed forward in the modified rover, its reinforced frame groaning under the strain of jagged ice and treacherous terrain. The vehicle had been transformed into a makeshift lifeline, part transport, part sanctuary. But it was far from invincible. Every bump and crack threatened to send them tumbling into one of Europa's countless crevasses, where rescue would be impossible. Yet neither Elias nor Lyra hesitated. They were driven by a shared purpose that eclipsed fear. Lyra sat silently beside Elias, her glow flickering faintly as if mirroring the tension around them. She clutched the glowing orb close to her chest, its soft hum resonating through the cabin. Though she couldn't explain its significance in words, Elias understood its importance well enough. It wasn't just an object. It was hope incarnate, a symbol of peace for her fractured world. Protecting it meant protecting her people, and perhaps even humanity itself. As they traveled, the hunters grew closer. Their tracks crisscrossed the landscape like scars, evidence of their relentless pursuit. Occasionally, distant flashes of light illuminated the horizon, signaling attempts to disable or intercept the rover. Each time, Elias pushed the vehicle harder, weaving between icy ridges and using the moon's natural features as cover. His hands gripped the controls tightly, knuckles white with effort, while Lyra leaned forward, her eyes scanning the darkness outside. One night, disaster struck. A sudden explosion rocked the rover, sending shards of ice flying in all directions. Elias cursed under his breath as alarms blared, warning of critical damage to the engine. He brought the vehicle to a halt, stepping out cautiously to assess the situation. What he saw made his heart sink. The rear stabilizer was shattered, and coolant leaked steadily onto the ice. Without repairs, they wouldn't make it much farther. Inside, Lyra watched anxiously as Elias worked feverishly to patch up the damage. Using salvaged parts from her crashed ship, he managed to stabilize the engine temporarily, but the solution was far from permanent. They needed shelter, and fast. Scanning the area, Elias spotted something promising on the horizon. A towering structure jutting out from the ice, half-buried and ancient-looking. It was a remnant of human exploration, left behind decades ago during early missions to Europa. If they could reach it, they might find tools and resources to continue their journey. Reaching the structure proved no easy feat. The storm intensified, battering the rover with winds so fierce that visibility dropped to near zero. Lyra pressed herself against the window, her glow dimming further as exhaustion took hold. Sensing her distress, Elias reached over and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're almost there," he murmured, though he knew she couldn't understand. Somehow, the gesture seemed to calm her, and she nodded weakly, trusting him implicitly. When they finally arrived at the abandoned outpost, Elias felt a surge of relief. The building was battered but intact, its reinforced walls offering protection from the elements. Inside, they discovered remnants of old equipment, tools, power cells, and even a dusty map detailing potential launch sites scattered across Europa's surface. One site stood out, a hidden platform buried beneath layers of ice, designed for emergency evacuations. It was risky. Getting there would require navigating some of the most dangerous terrain on the moon. But it was their best chance. With renewed determination, Elias and Lyra set to work. They scavenged what they could from the outpost, reinforcing the rover and preparing for the final leg of their journey. Along the way, Lyra began sharing more projections, showing Elias glimpses of her homeworld's beauty and the devastation wrought by war. These visions fueled his resolve. He saw not only the stakes of their mission but also the possibilities. If Lyra succeeded in protecting the orb, it could mean salvation, not just for her people, but for countless others. Finally, after days of grueling travel, they reached the launch platform. Buried deep beneath the ice, it was a marvel of engineering, untouched by time. Working together, Elias and Lyra activated the dormant systems, powering up the platform's launch mechanisms. As the machinery roared to life, Elias helped Lyra board her repaired ship, ensuring she had everything she needed for the journey home. Before departing, Lyra turned to Elias one last time. Her glowing skin pulsed brightly, and she projected a single image onto it. Two figures standing side by side beneath twin suns. It was a promise, a silent vow that their bond would endure, no matter the distance between them. Then, with a final nod of gratitude, she stepped aboard her ship and sealed the hatch. As the vessel ascended into the sky, Elias watched until it disappeared among the stars. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to breathe deeply, feeling both emptiness and fulfillment. Lyra was gone, but her presence lingered, a reminder that even in the vastness of space, connection was possible. Elias returned to Earth carrying more than memories. Hidden within his pocket was a small, pulsating fragment of the orb Lyra had entrusted to him, a token of hope and a bridge to the future. Little did he know, this gift would spark a revolution, uniting humanity and aliens alike in pursuit of a brighter tomorrow. When Elias returned to Earth, he was a changed man. The journey back felt surreal, as though the icy wilderness of Europa and the glowing presence of Lyra were fading dreams rather than lived experiences. Yet the small, pulsating fragment she had entrusted to him, a shard of the orb, was very real, nestled securely in his pocket. It hummed softly, its energy resonating with an otherworldly warmth that reminded him of her every time he touched it. Upon landing, Elias was met with both awe and suspicion. His superiors at the space agency demanded answers about the crash site, the mysterious alien ship, and the weeks he'd spent alone on Europa. At first, Elias hesitated, unsure how much to reveal, but when he showed them the fragment, their skepticism turned into stunned silence. Scientists swarmed around it, running tests and marveling at its properties. The shard emitted clean, limitless energy, a resource humanity had long sought but never achieved. It wasn't just advanced technology, it was revolutionary. Elias recounted his story carefully, omitting details about Lyra's pursuers and the war ravaging her homeworld. Instead, he framed her as a survivor seeking refuge, emphasizing her courage and the bond they had formed. He described how she had shared visions of her world, teaching him lessons about resilience, compassion, and hope. To those who listened, it sounded almost poetic, a tale of connection across species and stars. The scientific community worked tirelessly to unlock the secrets of the shard. Over months of study, they discovered blueprints encoded within its energy field, designs for sustainable power sources capable of ending humanity's reliance on fossil fuels. These plans weren't just theoretical, they were practical, scalable solutions that could transform entire industries. News of the breakthrough spread like wildfire, igniting debates about ethics, responsibility, and the future of interstellar relations. For Elias, the aftermath was bittersweet. On one hand, he was hailed as a hero, celebrated for bringing humanity closer to the stars. On the other hand, he couldn't shake the feeling of loss. Lyra was out there somewhere, fighting battles he could barely comprehend. He often found himself staring at the night sky, wondering if she thought of him too, if she ever looked back toward Earth and remembered their brief but profound connection. Years passed, and the impact of the shard rippled outward. Cities powered by clean energy sprang up across the globe, reducing pollution and healing ecosystems once thought beyond repair. Humanity began looking outward again, not with fear or greed, but with curiosity and optimism. Space exploration flourished, driven by the belief that cooperation, not conquest, was the key to progress. Then, one fateful evening, something extraordinary happened. Astronomers detected an unusual signal emanating from deep space, a rhythmic pulse unlike anything they'd encountered before. When decoded, the message revealed coordinates pointing to a distant star system. Attached was a single image, two figures standing side by side beneath twin suns, the same vision Lyra had projected onto her skin during their final moments together. Elias recognized it immediately. Though decades had passed since their parting, his heart raced as he realized what this meant. Lyra hadn't forgotten him, or Earth. She was reaching out, inviting humanity to join her people in building a brighter future. The discovery sparked global excitement, uniting nations in a way no crisis ever could. Plans were made to send a delegation to the coordinates, carrying messages of peace and gratitude alongside samples of Earth's culture and achievements. As the mission launched into the cosmos, Elias stood among the crowd watching the spacecraft ascend. Now an old man, his hair silver and his body frail, he felt a sense of fulfillment wash over him. He had played a small role in bridging two worlds, proving that even in the vastness of space, understanding and compassion could prevail. Somewhere far away, Lyra watched the vessel approach her homeworld. Her glow brightened as she stepped forward to greet the human representatives, her heart swelling with pride. Together, they would forge a new chapter, one defined not by war or division, but by unity and hope. And so, under twin suns, two species came together, bound by trust and shared purpose. In the end, Elias's journey hadn't been just about saving Lyra. It had been about inspiring humanity to reach for the stars, guided by the light of connection and the promise of a better tomorrow.